I'm tired and the caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. That was the other thing, hasn't kicked in yet. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Father James. Yes, it's the Our Lady of Guadalupe coffee mug that I've got here. I've got a bit of an update for you about our buildings. It's been a while since we've talked about that, hasn't it? Well, the reason I've waited so long to give you an update is because we've been waiting to get clarity about what exactly is happening, specifically with the Immaculate Conception location, because it was conditionally sold about 2 months ago. There were a number of conditions on this sale, and I'm pleased to tell you, as of last week, the final condition was met, and the sale that was agreed upon will go through on April 3rd. So next Monday, we will be, God willing, handing over a set of keys, and a certain amount of money will be deposited with the Archdiocese, and no longer will we be looking after the property of Immaculate Conception. I know that for some of you who had a connection with that church, I know that this is, it's almost like the closing of the coffin, in a sense that it's the final step in a grieving process, and I want to acknowledge it. I want to acknowledge that grief. It's been a long process. April 3rd, when you think back to when we started this whole process, it's been about 2.5 years. So I want to give you full disclosure, everything that we know about what's happening. The sale amount that we got for the property was much more than initially expected. One of the reasons for that is that last year we worked with HRM when they were doing their master plan for the rezoning, and we applied for a portion of that land to be zoned differently than institutional, which in a sense there's greater potential use for that land, and it increased the value of the property. So we sold the property for $1.575 million. Now, what will happen to that money? Well, it's the same as what will happen to the funds we get from the sale of our other property, St. Paul's. But let me just tell you, 73% of that money will be on deposit with the Archdiocese in our name, and we will be investing that money in a GIC, hoping to get around 4.5%. And while we will have the benefit of the interest on that investment, the capital will remain untouched, because the capital, these resources, we preceded this whole restructuring in looking at our buildings with a principle that buildings into buildings, people into people. We ought to raise resources to grow the church of people, to grow people by the gifts of people. And we want to recycle our buildings by, recycling buildings. We want to renew our buildings by recycling buildings. So buildings into buildings, people into people. So that capital will be put on deposit and will go towards the future building renewal project here at the site of St. Peter's. This was the option 4 that was identified 1.5 years ago through our options committee. What about that other 27%? Well, 3% of it goes towards the real estate firm that helped us, and many of you know, if you've ever sold a property, that 3% is pretty good. Usually it's about 6%. The remaining 24% goes to the Archdiocese. Now it's split into two parts. Number one, there is 14% is what's called an assessment, and that's basically a tax we pay to the Archdiocese, and they normally tax ordinary income. A case could be made perhaps that this is not exactly ordinary income, but we've been in conversation with the diocese about this, and look, they support our attempts to build for our future, and the conversation is ongoing, and the Archdiocese generally has a history of helping parishes out in times like that. The other 10%, it goes towards a fund to help parishes, renew buildings. So in all likelihood, that 10% will come right back to us. So that's what's going to happen as of next week, God willing, that everything, I don't think there's any reason to be concerned that it's not going to happen. The other update is that we have also had a conditional sale on the property of St. Paul's Parish. Now, there are multiple conditions still to be met. Now, you might say, well, what do you mean conditions? What kind of conditions? Well, there's an environmental check, for buried oil tanks or oil. There's evaluation of the building itself. They have to do the, I forget the word, like the measuring off and all of that stuff. You know the technical stuff, well, maybe. But there is a whole bunch of technical stuff that they do. In some ways, it's a formality. It's just a matter of time. We don't expect any problems. So the good news is that we had kind of hoped that anything above 2.5 million would be great, and we ended up with getting $2.9 million for that property. Again, it sounds like it sounds great in some ways, and it is. It's wonderful. But again, I want to recognize that there's also a sadness in this, because we will be handing over that it'll be the final step in losing that property in the hearts for many people. The tentative closing date, if everything goes according to plan, is June 9th. So on June 9th, we will be handing over the keys for St. Paul's as well. So same thing with that 2.9, with the percentage, how it's distributed, and the remaining money that comes to us will be locked in and will be used in the future for the renewal of our building. Now, speaking of that, we do have a building renewal committee that's been meeting for a couple of months now. We've been meeting with architects to look at some concepts, and probably within the next month or two, we'll be beginning a process to share some of the concepts we've looked at around the renewal of this location, because this building is, 1968 it was built. It's coming on, it's going to be 60 years old soon, right? So it needs to be updated. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in this building, even to bring it back to its original splendor. But we recognize that the needs that this building sought to fulfill in 1968 are very different from the needs of the church today. And so we've talked about this already. We talked about this in our dreaming process, when we looked at values, when we looked at the future, and when we worked with the architect. So will be more information to come about that. But things are moving. They are moving. Now, this is quite a transition point for us as a parish, because if you're aware of our financial situation, last year was a difficult year because the cost of fuel went up. The cost of insurance or insurance premiums increased 40%. So buildings were really, really pulling us down. And as we move into the future, this is what we hope, that overall costs are going to continue to come down, and our income, God willing, will continue to increase as more and more parishioners have a sense of where it is that we're going and want to be a part of it and want to make that happen. There is one other location, of course, and that's the St. Anthony's location. We're still working on the vision of having that location being a location of a campus in which there is outreach to the poor, a lot of ministry being done to support the poor, as well as having the Eucharist celebrated there and it being a place of prayer. We have, the hall is being used by the food bank. We've got the House of Hope. So there's a lot of activity there, but still the buildings are empty a lot of the time. And what we have to aim for is doing this in a sustainable way. If we're going to pay the money to keep those buildings running and keep them open, and they cost a lot, they're expensive, they are. And we're not making ends meet out there yet, but we do believe that we can. And we are right now exploring different proposals from different community groups about the use of the main church building. We have the divider has been closed. The pews have been removed from the back end, so we have a chapel, but we do have a space that we're looking to have put to use. I mean, we can't heat an empty building. It's only used once or twice a week. So we are in the process of discerning who to work with, And so please keep that in your prayers. We'll keep you posted about that in a future video. Finally, I do want to say as well that we're still burdened by the cost of buildings. Buildings cost a lot of money. Heat costs a lot of money. Think of the location here at St. Peter's, not to mention the St. Anthony's location and all the buildings that we have here. So these developments in the next couple of weeks and months are in the right direction, but we're still not out of the woods, but we still continue to move forward. Finally, and there is, I know there was something else I was supposed to say. Oh yeah, I just remembered. Some of you might be asking, well, that money that goes to the diocese that we have on deposit, is that money in danger in any way? Because many of you are aware that as of about 1.5 years ago, there was a class action process initiated in our diocese, primarily looking at cases from many, many decades ago. And I want to assure you, as of an update just a few days ago from the Archdiocese, that the amount of that class action has been settled and that the payout has already happened. So no, what we receive from the sale of those buildings will not be in danger. Finally, some of you might be asking about the sacred items in both Immaculate Conception and at St. Paul's. And as has been previously communicated, we were working on this, and we are looking at identifying some legacy artwork that would be, God willing, incorporated into a renewed building in this location, and other items have already been distributed, and we have done our best to work with parishioners who have expressed interest in particular pieces. So that work is ongoing at this point. So I wanted to fill you in. I know it's not exactly a kind of Lenten video in a sense, but it's part of our reality as we navigate this time of spiritual renewal and as we grapple with the fact that we've got to renew our physical reality as well. So thanks everyone for your patience in this and for dealing with all of these details that I've given you. Please continue to pray that we may go through this process in the proper fashion. Thanks and God bless.